Ma'am, step aside. Random inspection. You look a bit nervous today.
I'm a doctor on call, officer. What's this really about?
Don't raise your voice, ma'am. People like you get escorted out fast.
People like me save lives, officer. You might need one someday.
We'll see about that, doctor. Step over here for questioning.
What happened that afternoon inside one of America's busiest airports proved that dignity is not something you grant. It's something you either recognize or get humbled by life for ignoring. It started like any ordinary travel day. The sound of suitcase wheels echoed against the tile floor. Announcements rolled through the speakers, muffled by the chatter of tired travelers. Among them was Dr. Maya Ellis, a 39-year-old heart surgeon returning home from a medical conference in Boston. She had been the keynote speaker, delivering a talk on equity in emergency medicine. The irony of that title would haunt her for weeks to come. Before we get started, where are you tuning in from? Drop your country or state in the comments. And hey, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's the time, because what's about to happen next will leave you speechless, and you won't want to miss stories like this. Maya wasn't dressed like the doctors you see on billboards. She preferred comfort, jeans, a beige trench coat, and sneakers. Her hair was tied back, face bare of makeup except for a trace of lip balm. In one hand, she carried her briefcase filled with research notes and a plaque engraved with her name. In the other, her phone. She was texting her assistant about rounds scheduled for the next morning at Emory Hospital. She didn't notice the officer right away. Officer Daniels had been standing by the baggage area for nearly 20 minutes, watching the crowd. His eyes landed on her the way a spotlight freezes a stage actor mid-movement. Something about her caught his attention, though not her behavior, not her luggage, not her actions, just her presence. A woman like her, alone, calm, composed. He frowned slightly and spoke into his radio. Then he started walking toward her. "Ma'am, excuse me, ma'am. I'm going to need to see some identification." She turned, startled but polite. "Is there a problem? We got a report of suspicious activity near the restricted gate area. You match the description." She blinked. "I just got off flight 233 from Boston. I've been standing right here waiting for my suitcase." His tone stiffened. "ID, please." She handed him her passport. Her hospital badge slipped out of her purse and hit the floor. He picked it up and stared at it, then chuckled. "Dr. Ellis, huh? Anybody can make one of these online." The words hit harder than she expected. It wasn't the first time someone questioned her credentials, but something about the casual dismissal in his voice, like her entire career was a prop, made her chest tighten. She took a breath. "You can call Emory University Hospital. They'll verify it." He didn't move. He just stared. Then, into his radio, "Dispatch, I might need a second unit." Within minutes, 2 more officers appeared. Travelers began to slow down, curious. Phones came out. Cameras rolled. The murmur of whispering spread like wildfire through the terminal. Maya could feel the heat of their stares pressing on her skin. "Empty your bag," Daniels ordered. "Excuse me?" she said quietly. "You heard me. Bag on the table. Let's go." She hesitated, then complied. Out came her stethoscope, her folder of medical data, and the polished glass plaque from the conference. Daniel smirked at the engraved title. "For outstanding contribution to medical equity? That's cute." Maya's voice cracked, not from fear, but disbelief. "This is harassment." He crossed his arms. "You're acting defensive. People who have nothing to hide don't act like this." She met his gaze. "People who have nothing to hide don't expect to be profiled for existing." The air thickened. One of the junior officers shifted uncomfortably. A family nearby ushered their kids away. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Daniels stepped closer. "Ma'am, calm down." "I am calm," she said, steady but trembling. "You just don't like that I'm calm while you're wrong." That line, caught by a traveler's cell phone, would later explode across the internet. The search dragged on. They asked for her boarding pass, her itinerary, even her hotel receipt from Boston. Everything checked out, yet Daniels still wouldn't let her leave. He kept saying, "We're waiting for confirmation." Confirmation of what? No one knew. 15 minutes became 30. She stood there, surrounded by uniforms and strangers recording her humiliation. One woman whispered, "Is she stealing something?" Another said, "No, I think she's famous or something." Maya wanted to disappear, but she refused to shrink. Her posture stayed upright, her eyes forward. Finally, an airport supervisor arrived, a black man about her age. He asked what was going on. Daniel started explaining, but the supervisor cut him off. "This woman's ID checks out. She's exactly who she says she is. Release her." Daniel's face flushed red. "I was just following procedure." "Procedure doesn't include detaining someone without probable cause," the supervisor replied. Maya gathered her belongings silently. As she walked away, Daniels muttered something under his breath. She turned, just enough for the camera to catch her face. Hurt, but unbroken. By the time she reached her car, her phone was buzzing. Strangers had already begun posting the footage online. The clip showed her standing tall while officers circled her. The comments came fast. "She handled that with class. Typical profiling. This woman deserves justice." Within 24 hours, it had 5 million views. The next morning, Maya woke up to messages from journalists, attorneys, even fellow doctors. Her hospital issued a statement of support. The airport police department issued one of ongoing investigation. Daniels, meanwhile, was temporarily suspended. But Maya wasn't looking for revenge. She was looking for accountability. She filed a civil suit, $10 million in damages for unlawful detention, emotional distress, and racial discrimination. Her lawyers built a meticulous case. Footage from multiple cameras, eyewitness testimony, travel records, timestamps, and the supervisor's confirmation that no report matched her description. The evidence was airtight. During the hearing, Daniels avoided eye contact. On the stand, he stumbled through explanations about standard procedure and public safety. But when the opposing counsel played the video clip, his laughter at her hospital badge, his mocking tone, the courtroom went silent. Even the judge's expression hardened. Maya testified last. Her voice never wavered. "I've performed over 500 open-heart surgeries. I've held lives in my hands. But in that airport, none of that mattered. I was just another black woman who had to prove she belonged." Her words hung in the air like a verdict before the verdict. The case didn't take long. The jury ruled in her favor. Full compensation, public apology, and mandatory racial bias training for the department. And Daniels' dismissal from service. The headline hit every major outlet. Airport police ordered to pay $10 million in racial profiling lawsuit. When reporters crowded outside the courthouse, Maya didn't gloat. She didn't smile for the cameras. She simply said, "Justice isn't about money. It's about memory. Because if we forget moments like this, they'll just keep happening." That line became a rallying cry online.
Hashtags spread. Other travelers came forward with similar experiences. Airlines began revising internal bias protocols. Maya was invited to speak on national television, not as a victim, but as an advocate. Months later, she returned to the same airport for another conference. The staff recognized her immediately. Security guards nodded respectfully. The same terminal that once held her humiliation now echoed with quiet acknowledgement. She walked past the baggage claim where it all began, paused, and smiled faintly, not out of victory, but closure. Behind her, a mother pointed her out to her teenage daughter and whispered, "That's her, the doctor who stood up for herself." The girl smiled shyly and said, "She doesn't look scared." Her mother replied, "That's because courage doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just stands still." As Maya boarded her flight, she thought about the irony again. Her lecture, Equity in Emergency Medicine, wasn't supposed to be personal, but now it was. She'd learned that equity isn't only something you fight for in hospitals. It's something you demand in every hallway, every terminal, every system that forgets your humanity. She fastened her seatbelt, closed her eyes, and whispered to herself, not angry, just done being silent. Outside the window, the plane lifted through a crimson sunset, disappearing into the clouds. And that's when the narrator voice cuts in again, the same tone that started this story, calm but carrying weight. Because stories like this aren't just about outrage, they're about what happens next. It's about what we do when we see someone being disrespected or dismissed or profiled for existing. If you were there that day, what would you have done? Would you have spoken up? Would you have filmed? Would you have looked away? Comment below, because silence has never changed anything. But stories like this, they remind us that one person standing tall can make the whole system shake. When the ruling came down, the courtroom emptied slowly, but the story refused to fade. News outlets replayed the same 30-second clip again and again. The smirk on Daniel's face, the calm in Maya's voice, the supervisor stepping in. Commentators dissected every frame. To some, it was a clear example of systemic bias. To others, it was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But for Maya, it was a wound that kept reopening each time the footage appeared on her phone screen. She didn't want to be a symbol. She just wanted to be treated like a person. In the weeks that followed, her life changed in ways she couldn't have imagined. Emails poured in from strangers, teachers, nurses, pilots, other Black professionals, thanking her for standing up. A college student wrote, "You made me believe I can walk into my internship without apologizing for being there." Another message came from a retired white officer who said, "I watched that video with my daughter. It made me rethink the things I used to laugh off at work." Maya read each note, heart heavy and hopeful at once.
But fame has its shadows. Reporters camped outside her hospital. Paparazzi snapped photos when she stopped for coffee. Comment sections turned toxic. Some people called her money-hungry. Others accused her of overreacting. She told herself not to read the comments, but curiosity always won. Every insult reopened the same bruise. That even after justice, respect still wasn't guaranteed. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his small apartment surrounded by silence. His badge had been turned in, his name printed in headlines, his phone filled with voicemails from people he used to call friends, but now only whispered about him. The union couldn't save him. The department wanted distance. He replayed the body camera footage alone at night, frame by frame, watching himself laugh at the doctor's badge. He had convinced himself in the moment that he was doing his job, that procedure mattered more than perception, but watching it again
Stripped of ego and authority, he saw what everyone else saw, a man trying to feel powerful by making someone else small. He reached out to Maya through his lawyer, requesting a private apology meeting. She hesitated days. Part of her wanted to decline, to leave the past sealed. But another part of her, the healer, knew closure wasn't always for the offender. Sometimes it was for the one who survived. They met in a conference room at her hospital, under fluorescent lights that hummed softly. Daniels looked smaller without the uniform, his voice uncertain. "I'm not here to justify anything," he said. "I just wanted to say I was wrong. Completely. I don't know what I was thinking." Maya watched him struggle for words. He wasn't a villain from the viral video anymore. He was just a man confronted by his own reflection. "You saw me as a threat because somewhere along the way, someone taught you that women like me don't belong in spaces of authority." He nodded. "I grew up hearing things that I never questioned, and I carried them into my job. That's the danger. Bias doesn't always look like hate. Sometimes it looks like habit." For a long moment, neither spoke. The security camera in the hallway caught only two people sitting in silence, one unlearning, one forgiving. When Daniels finally stood to leave, he whispered, "Thank you for hearing me out." She nodded once. She simply said, "Do better." Outside that room, the world moved on. But something had shifted. The airport police department launched new training programs built around Maya's testimony. They invited her to consult on bias awareness modules. At first she refused, then realized change only happens when those harmed are brave enough to guide it. She spent weekends designing scenarios based on real encounters, teaching officers how to read behavior without prejudice. It was draining work, but meaningful. One afternoon after a session, a young rookie approached her. "Dr. Ellis," he said shyly, "I wasn't sure what to expect from this training. My mom's a nurse. She told me to watch that video months ago. I didn't know it'd be you standing here." He smiled nervously. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened to you. And thank you. You changed how I see the badge." She shook his hand. "That's how we start, one person at a time." Outside, reporters still mentioned her case whenever a new story about bias surfaced. Her name became shorthand for quiet resistance, for dignity under pressure. But behind the titles and interviews, Maya kept her focus where it always had been, on her patients. She returned to the operating room, her sanctuary. The rhythmic beep of monitors replaced the noise of headlines. Every surgery reminded her why she had chosen medicine. To fix what was broken. To keep hearts beating. One evening after finishing a 12-hour shift, she stepped outside the hospital just as rain began to fall.
The smell of wet pavement brought back the memory of that airport floor, cold and unyielding. She tilted her head to the sky, letting the rain mix with the tears she hadn't realized were falling. Healing, she thought, isn't a straight line. It's a circle. You keep coming back to the pain until it no longer controls you. Months later, a documentary crew asked to include her story in a film about racial bias in law enforcement. She agreed on one condition. They couldn't edit out her message about empathy. "People love outrage," she told them, "but outrage fades. Understanding lasts." During filming, she revisited the terminal where it all happened. The new security team greeted her warmly, and the supervisor who had defended her that day walked alongside her. "Feels different now, doesn't it?" he asked. She smiled. "It feels seen." The documentary aired nationwide. In classrooms, students analyzed her testimony. On social media, clips resurfaced with captions like "Grace under pressure" and "When education meets courage." Maya watched quietly, not out of pride but gratitude. If even one young woman saw her and thought, "I belong here," that was enough. Daniels, meanwhile, found work at a community outreach program. He spent his days mentoring troubled teens, teaching them about accountability and respect. Sometimes when the topic of bias came up, he shared his own story, leaving out names but not the lesson. "You can't protect what you don't value," he told them, "and you can't value what you refuse to see." The kids listened,
Some rolled their eyes, but others nodded slowly, recognizing a man trying to rebuild from ruin. Years passed. Maya published a book titled Invisible Lines, blending her medical expertise with her experiences confronting prejudice in professional spaces. It became a bestseller, not because it was sensational, but because it was honest. She donated a portion of the proceeds to scholarships for minority students pursuing medicine. Each check she signed felt like planting a seed in soil she once had to fight to stand on. On the anniversary of the airport incident, she gave a lecture at a university. The auditorium was packed. Students, professors, even a few uniformed officers. She began by showing the viral clip. Gasps filled the room as the old footage flickered on the screen. Then she paused it and turned to the audience. That woman on the screen is me. But it's also anyone who's ever been reduced to a stereotype before being recognized as a person. She walked across the stage slowly. Bias thrives in silence. It dies in conversation. So talk about it. Don't wait for cameras to roll. Afterward, a student approached her, eyes wide with admiration. "Dr. Ellis, do you ever wish it hadn't happened?" Maya thought for a moment. "Every day," she said. "But wishing doesn't change reality. Turning pain into purpose does." When the auditorium emptied, she lingered alone on stage, looking at the frozen image of herself on the projector, her head held high, surrounded by officers. She didn't see humiliation anymore. She saw endurance. That night, she walked through the city, the hum of traffic echoing like applause in the distance. She passed a mural on a brick wall, her face painted beside the words, "Respect has no color." Someone had added a stethoscope around her neck in blue spray paint. She smiled, touched the wall gently, and whispered, "Keep watching. Keep learning." And that's how the story ends. Not with anger, but evolution. The doctor who was once detained for matching a description became the description of dignity itself. The officer who mocked her learned humility in the quiet aftermath. The system that failed her began to listen, one policy at a time. Change didn't happen overnight, but it happened because one person refused to accept humiliation as the final word. So if you've made it this far, ask yourself, what would you have done in that terminal? Would you have spoken up or looked away? Share this story if you believe that respect should never be a privilege. It should be the default setting for every human interaction. Because accountability isn't revenge, it's growth. And the moment we start seeing each other clearly, without fear or bias, that's when justice stops being a headline and becomes a habit. Follow for more stories that remind us, no matter how loud prejudice gets, dignity speaks louder when it stands its ground.